It is Father's Day. And my prayer is that each of us would be able to rest hold of whatever bit of happiness, semblance of happiness, or actual happiness we can in this day. Because even as I stated on Mother's Day, that, these days bring up all kinds of things for us. For some, we celebrate the continued presence of our fathers, either in body or in spirit. Some of us long for the presence of our fathers in body or in spirit, or even in idea. Nonetheless, we are here. And we have to make the most of this moment that we have. Yes. Amen? Yes. Amen. And so we go into or begin a new worship series over the next 4 weeks. We'll be talking about inheritance. And today we'll talk about inheritance of wisdom. And then our next week we'll talk about the inheritance of attentiveness. And then we'll move on to talk about the inheritance of empowerment. And then we'll close out with the inheritance of trust. But today we begin with the inheritance of wisdom. But inheritance is something that is passed on. It's a legacy. It may be genetic characters transmitted from parent to offspring. Maybe something that is taken collectively. An inheritance is a quality, a characteristic, or other immaterial possessions. It's a portion. For some, a birthright, or even a heritage. And so we want to talk about an inheritance of wisdom. And Proverbs does this curious thing throughout the book of Proverbs, that wisdom is personified. Wisdom isn't a concept, but wisdom is personified in Proverbs. But when you think about wisdom, I know what I do. Often when I think about wisdom, I'll often think about knowledge as well. We talk about wisdom and knowledge. Even in Proverbs 9 and 10, you have the invocation of both wisdom and knowledge. So they must not be the same thing. But often you'll hear people speak of wisdom and knowledge as though they're synonymous. So the difference between wisdom and knowledge, having an understanding of the difference between wisdom and knowledge is important. For knowledge is about facts and figures that we acquire through study, research, investigation, observation, or even experience. But wisdom is the ability to discern and judge which aspects of that knowledge are true, right, lasting, and applicable to your life. See, if you go in my office and you look behind my desk on the wall, you'll see some frames and you'll see some stuff written on those frames. That's about some knowledge that I'm still paying for. It doesn't have anything to do with wisdom. Amen? That just says that is a snapshot. At certain periods in history, I knew some things. And I was able to demonstrate that I knew some things. That's knowledge. But if you observe me throughout the happenings of my daily living, then you'll come to understand whether or not I have wisdom. So as we look at this text here in Proverbs, there's a unifying thread at play. The relational nature of God is revealed through this passage about wisdom. From the very beginning, God, with wisdom as God's playmate and master worker. Did you hear that language in the text? As God's playmate and master worker, there was a relational in the process of creating, of molding, shaping, illuminating, and delighting in the created order. Wisdom says in Proverbs that before anything came into being, I was. So if God relied on wisdom. Don't you think you need to rely on wisdom? Didn't say before creation God had knowledge or that God brought knowledge into being. That's not what the text says. The text says that wisdom came into being before anything came into being. And this portrait of wisdom and God does affirm the relational quality of God that we see in the inner workings of the Trinity. For God is not a lone ranger. So if God is not a lone ranger, don't you know that you need help to get through this life? The nature of God challenges our individualistic orientation and speaks prophetically to our culture's glorification of personal agency and individual sovereignty. And yes, today is Father's Day, and I have to confess, as I did in the earlier service, that I used to avoid preaching on Father's Day because I have some daddy issues. Am I the only one? Oh, I am. Okay, all right. I mean, I have some daddy issues. And at my ripe old age, I'm still trying to figure it out. Still trying to work it out. So, when you come to me talking about Happy Father's Day, I just smile. And pray that that's your reality. Amen? Amen? But I would always try to avoid preaching on Father's Day. And so I was always grateful when annual conference would run through Father's Day. Because I didn't have to deal with it. I'd be in Redlands, 2,000-degree heat. That was fine. That was just fine with me. Because it would be hotter up in here if I had to preach on Father's Day. But not only I have issues preaching on Father's Day, or even being in church service on Father's Day because of my daddy issues or my daddy wounds. I mean, I had other struggles. I mean, I don't have biological children. I have a niece who wants everything that I have. And then looking at the men who were part of, churches I was a part of, I would always be concerned, so whether or not I felt up to the task to even share a message on Father's Day about fathers. And then I think more generally about just the images of toxic masculinity that are so pervasive within our culture. That just force this lack of true understanding of what a man is, or we rely solely upon pop culture to describe for us what manhood is all about or what fatherhood is all about. And that stuff, just for me, can I just testify for a moment? Just for me, just became so overwhelming that I forgot about some prime examples of fatherhood in my own life. And allowed the negative images that came from what was not or what I longed for to overshadow that which was real and present. So thinking about my grandfather, strong man, an ever-present father who prayed, worked, cared for his family. I mean, he had a couple kids outside of the house. But he came back home. He came back home. He took care of all of them. Did what he had to do. And he didn't mind crying when crying was what was called for. And if you called on him to pray, he could pray. And it was my grandfather that I heard tell one of my uncles, my uncle was down on himself about something. I don't know what it was about, because I was behind the chair and they didn't know I was behind the chair listening. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what it was about. I was like 8. But I remember part of the conversation. I remember my grandfather saying, God is only concerned with whether or not you are faithful unto God. God is not concerned about what you did or what you did not do. God is concerned about whether or not you are faithful unto Him. But over at my, Daddy's Ain't Worth Nothing party, we were singing and partying so hard over here, it was drowning out the good and the reality over on this side. And there are other men too who have stood up and stood in the gap throughout the years. And oh, how unfortunate that this party over here was reigning supreme and making so much noise that I couldn't always hear the testimonies and the calls from those who had my back from day one. And I suspect for some of you that may be true as well. So here's what we know about wisdom according to the portrait that's painted here in Proverbs. First, wisdom is a creation of God. The first of God's acts long ago, even before the earth was created, there was wisdom. And what that says to me, beloved, particularly for our fathers, for our men, is that if you co-create something, then exercise wisdom in doing so. For it is an act of God to be creative. The first thing we see God do, the first thing we learned that God did was that God created. And so whenever we engage in the creative act or anything created, we are acting in our God-like nature. And if God, in God's creating, God did so alongside wisdom, then you must do the same. I mean, to make something out of nothing requires wisdom. And guess what? It's even more godlike to make something with someone else. It may not be a child. It may be a loving relationship. It may be a garden. It may be a protest movement. It may be a potluck. But to co-create is us living out our godlike nature. Amen. So wisdom is creation. Is a creation of God. Second, wisdom participated in God's handiwork. We see this in verse 30. When it says, "Then I was beside God like a master worker, and rejoiced in God before the outset of the world." And so what that says to me, or the lesson I believe that comes from that, is if you create something, participate with it. Don't abandon it. Love it, nurture it, care for it, give it the best chance it has for living fully. And if you mess up along the way, name it, own it, fix it, and live on. Do I need to say more about that? Need some examples? We okay? Right. Third, wisdom not only rejoiced in God, but also shared in God's delight for humanity. Wisdom not only rejoiced in God, but also shared in God's delight for humanity. We see that in verse 31. And what this says to me is that if you co-create something and participate with it, then rejoice in it and share it. To create and to walk away is to abandon and leave to chance. And that has happened all too often to so much and to so many. But to rejoice even when you're less than pleased demonstrates a hope in things to come. I think about when I was playing football in high school. And my senior year was a historic season for our football team. Historic. And that we were the only team in our school's history to lose every single game. We were 0-10. We started losing, we finished losing. We were so bad that about halfway through the season, we didn't know if we would make the whole season because people started quitting the team. Nobody wanted to be on the team. My friends were like, why are you on that team? I'm like, I like it. It's fun. See, for some of them, their hopes and their dreams were dashed because they thought they were going to get a nice football scholarship to college and all that stuff. I was having fun with my friends. Just like, hey, I'm not on the football team. I'm just out hanging with my friends. But they quit. They quit along the way. Just dropping off one by one, week by week. And our last game was always our homecoming game. And so the big thing around our little town was, surely they'll win the homecoming game. These big white boys from somewhere under the mountains down there to play us for that homecoming game, and my God, it was like 60-something to 0. But here's what I remember about that final game. As we were walking off the field, we couldn't run off. You run off when you win. But when you lose, you walk off. So walking off the field, as we're going out the little gate, I felt someone grab my hand, sort of tug on me, pulled me over to him, and he said, "I just want you to know I'm proud of you for sticking this out." So, because I don't think I would have. And he followed me home to the locker room, and everybody's in there moaning and groaning and whatever. And he made a speech to the team. Thanked us, congratulated us for sticking it out. And he said, this is a lesson you will take with you for the rest of your lives. That those who dropped off along the way will not ever know. So he rejoiced, even in our assumed failure. And he shared in that moment with us. And I'm grateful for that. And I imagine you have those people in your lives as well. And so on Father's Day, we talk about this inheritance of wisdom. My uncle exercised great wisdom in that moment, great strength and power. And so I started looking online. I was thinking about, different songs about fathers, fatherhood, Father's Day, and that. And because the only ones that were coming to mind were lyrics like Papa was a Rolling Stone, where he laid his hat was his home. That's not uplifting. And I was thinking about Papa's got a brand new bag, and all that. And I was like, well, maybe that's not what we want to go with. And I started looking at different lyrics, and I was because I learned through music. Music helps me grasp concepts and remember things, and I started looking at songs that that songwriters or singers had penned about fatherhood or about being a father, and or to their children. And I thought I would share some of those lyrics with you today so that you might have some hooks upon which to hang your experiences as well. In John Legend's song Right By You that he wrote for his daughter Luna, you find these words that when you're growing old and feeling out of touch, listen to this song and just take care and know that I'll be there. Yeah, I'll be there. And some of us need to hear those words from our fathers, amen, and those who occupy those spaces in our lives. We all know Stevie Wonder's Isn't She Lovely, which he penned at the birth of his daughter Aisha. That isn't she pretty, truly the angel's best. I'm so happy we have been heaven blessed. Some of us need to hear that from our fathers or those who occupy those spaces and those roles in our lives. John Lennon penned for his youngest son, Sean, this song, Beautiful Boy, Darling Boy. It says, I can hardly wait to see you come of age, but I guess we'll both just have to be patient because it's a long way to go. Yeah. Great longing from a father for his son, and Will Smith, and just the two of us, which he, sampled Bill Withers for that, but the tenderness in those lyrics that he raps, I want to kiss you all the time, but I will test that butt when you get out of line. Got a little something for everybody. For everybody up here, and of course Luther Vandross, Dance with My Father. If I could get another chance, another walk, another dance with him, I'd play a song that would never, ever end. How I'd love, love, love to dance with my Father again. But here's the great lesson and the final one I'll share. From John Mayer. So fathers, be good to your daughters. Daughters will love like you do. Girls become lovers who turn into mothers. So mothers, be good to your daughters too. Wisdom. Wisdom is discerning what to do with the knowledge that we have. And because we're created by God, this ability, this spirit, this gift rests within us. And the challenge for us is to use it. To use it in every aspect of our lives. So that we grow closer to one another. And yes, that's how we grow closer with God. May you use your inheritance wisely. Amen.